Hello and welcome to the last This Week in Cricket for 2024. And what an amazing year it has been for cricket all across the world, but particularly in Melbourne this week. We will cover the Melbourne Miracle, the Boxing Day test between Australia and India. Plenty of other cricket going on around the world as well. The first team to get locked into the World Test Championship final is not Australia nor India, but it is South Africa. We'll cover their test victory against Pakistan, a real miracle there as well. And then we'll wrap up this year in Black Caps cricket, and we'll talk about the ongoing series in Sri Lanka, what Stu and Raj have liked from the Black Caps in this season, and much more on this last episode of This Week in Cricket for 2024, coming up soon. For the last time this year, well, boys.
Can we get a bit more animation out of you? I feel like you're holding yourself back.
I'm holding myself right back.
I'm going to call it like, what's the Melbourne Miracle? It wasn't a miracle, was it? They kind of controlled that game for most of that situation, right?
So you want more energy from me,
Yes.
and you want me to back off on the level of excitement.
I think that,
where would you like me to be?
Well, let's. I mean, we got to start with day 5, right? I think day 5 of this Australia-India test, we were bantering all day. Sort of, it really started about tea time, didn't it? In that test, when the chat really leveled up. I was thinking at that point, Jaiswal and Pant are going along quite nicely here. This game is over. Like, this game's been. It threatened to be an exciting game, and it looked like it was just going to peter out to a dull draw. Travis Head comes on, and the game changes, Baldy, and suddenly we're sitting here with and you've got a big smile on your face.
I didn't have a big smile on my face when Travis Head was given the ball, first ball after tea. I think if you could choose in world cricket anyone that you would like to have bowl the last over before tea, it would be Marnus Labuschagne. And if you could choose...
You're talking from a batting point of view.
If I'm batting... and I could choose anyone in that Australian team to bowl at me the last over before tea, it would be Marnus. And if I could choose anyone to get a couple of sighters as I come back after tea, it would be Travis Head. And I was apoplectic with rage and yelling at everyone in the TV. My whole family had to leave the room. I was there painting the walls by myself, just muttering to myself, why are they bowling Travis Head? This is outrageous. India will get back in. India will come out and, hit boundaries. I mean, they did a terrific job to get themselves to T3 down and give themselves a chance. Okay, they needed 228 or whatever it was in the last session. It would have had to have been 6.5, 7 and over to win the game. So it was probably out of reach even for Pant and Jaiswal. But as long as those two gentlemen were at the crease and you had Jadeja and Sundar to come, and Nitish Kumar Reddy, fresh off a maiden test century in the first innings. We must talk about that. There was enough firepower in the Indian lineup. I thought that if they really wanted to have a go, they had 20-odd overs with the old ball, with which they could have made some real hay. And if they had gone and run a ball in that session without taking too much risk, because they were getting lots of singles. I think you pointed it out on the chat, Raj. Lots of singles in that middle session, almost at will. It would have been a bit squeaky bum, I think, coming into the last half an hour if those two had batted on. But as it was, Rishabh Pant had an absolute rush of blood as he did in the first innings and hit one not quite down Mitchell Marsh's throat. It was a good catch coming around at deep long on. But from that point on, Australia had a sniff. And for once, I've been maligning Australia many times, including on the chat in the course of this test match, for not being able to bowl out the lower order of an opposition side at home. They actually went and did the job in this test match, and that's why they're up 2-1.
Can I ask what you were thinking about at the time? We've discussed here what we're going to talk about, what the tactics were or what we felt the tactics were. But what were you thinking about at the time when they've brought Travis Head on and he's continuing to bowl? It's not one over. He is continuing to bowl in partnership with Nathan Lyon. What is Australia trying to do there?
So the only thought process that was going through my head, I was thinking, okay, they must want to bowl as many overs as they can with the new ball. So they're trying to rush through 3 or 4 overs of Travis Head at one end and 3 or 4 overs at Nathan Lyon at the other end and get themselves 8 overs closer to the new ball and hopefully give themselves the equivalent of 2, maybe even 3 overs at the back end of the test match with a new ball, with their seamers still fresh. So they really only used the 3 main seamers in this test match. They bowled a little tiny bit of Mitchell Marsh here and there, but they didn't really go to him for any length of time. So I think what they were trying to do is go, well, Travis Head occasionally takes a wicket, breaks a partnership. If nothing else, we'll get 4 quick overs out of him. We'll try and bowl 8 overs in 20 minutes if we can. And then we've got that much closer to the second new ball, and we'll back Stark, Hazelwood, Boland to do the job at the end of the day. And, as it turned out, they got the crucial breakthrough that they needed, and Australia were able to regularly take wickets from there on in and get themselves closer to home.
Hazelwood would have struggled, but yeah, I think you're right on the team.
Did I say Hazelwood? I meant Boland. He wouldn't have taken many wickets, I wouldn't have thought.
You seem to have a theory about that, Travis Head. Maybe I'm giving them too much credit here, but do you think that they played the ego of Rishabh Pant and said like, we want to try and it will be a lot easier to try and bowl India out if they start playing some shots here?
100%. I think that they said that there is going to be a brain explosion. We've seen it already, and you look back through his career, it's been there before. This wasn't the Rishabh Pant that came to Australia and played these glorious booming cover drives to win games that they did on the series gone by. I think they put a bowler there. If they can get through some overs and get to the new ball quicker, if they get a wicket, even better. So I think that they were just trying to get through it, and they found a nut.
Do we maybe we want to try and stay positive a little bit, but what do we think India was trying? Like, do we think India, was that their plan to go? Obviously they lost those 3 early wickets, but I would say they started very negatively, and that's, in my opinion, that's kind of why they lost those first 3 wickets. They let Australia bowl at them for those first 20 overs, 25, 30 overs, and they said, we're just going to survive because maybe their plan was, let's get to T 3 down and then start to go for it. But I think you can't let bowlers of the likes of Cummins and Hazelwood, I've done it again, Stark and Boland, even Lyon, he bowled really well, I thought. You can't just let guys bowl at you.
I think from what we've seen in this test series, and particularly in this test match, you can take wickets with the new ball. It's very, very difficult. I know Australia took 7 wickets after tea with an old ball on the last day of the test match, but over the first 4 days of the test match, it was very, very difficult to take wickets after the 35th over because the ball started to get soft, it started to go dead, and on the first 4 days at least, there wasn't a lot of up and down bounce. There was an occasional one that went up and down. I want to talk about the Marsh dismissal because there was one that went up and down in that over. But generally speaking, after the 35th over, it was pretty good for batting for about 35 to 40 overs. And I think the Indian mentality would have been, okay, let's make sure that we're only 2 down at the 35 over mark. And then if we are, a good 30 over partnership, which they got from Jaiswal and Pant. They batted the whole session. They batted that whole middle session and put India in a position where both results were possible. Okay, it was very difficult to get 220 at 6.5 and over in the last session, but it was possible. They had the cattle to do it. But they needed 15 more minutes of Pant and Jaiswal together in that third session, and they didn't get it. 20 more minutes and Australia would have been disinterested for the rest of the day, I think. I think they would have tried a couple more things here and there, but I think it would have been like, okay, well, this is clearly going to be a draw. If we can't get these 2 out, then, the game's going to peter out. And they would have been, as they were in that second session, a lot more defensive with their field placing. As soon as they got that wicket, Australia pounced and they put guys around the bat. They put fielders in good positions to lower order batters to try and put them under pressure, put guys in their eye line, not just with the quick bowlers, but with Lyon too. And they did a tremendous job putting pressure on the lower order batters. If they hadn't have been able to do that early doors, we would have seen guys on the boundary, would have seen sweepers and so forth. And I think it would have been a lot easier for India to just pick Australia off for the rest of the day.
I have a slightly different sort of theory to it. I think India backed themselves to win the 5th test in Sydney. I think they went out and they played with a bit of a draw first mentality. We've talked about it on the podcast before with the Joe Root era of captaincy for England. A lot of times we saw them go out and play with a draw first mentality. Let's make sure that we can secure that draw and then we'll worry about winning it after that. I think that's a bit of what was done here. Rohit Sharma talked about building a platform to sort of do that run chase towards the end.
Was that in the aftermatch?
That was in the aftermath, but after match. But if you want to do that, that's fine. I just don't think Rohit Sharma is your guy. If you want to send him out there he's not the guy that gets 9 or 40. he's the guy who gets 40 off 9. Like he is the guy who goes out there and plays his natural game and scores runs with the field in. And they didn't do that this time.
But doesn't that make the Rishabh Pant shot all the more irresponsible? If that's the plan, is to bat through to stumps and not to try and smack the cover off it, that makes that shot even more irresponsible. Doesn't
I
it?
think there were mixed messages throughout this whole test, and I don't know if we want to have the Rohit Sharma conversation now, but
let's have it now because we have to have it at some point.
And I mean, he is, I think, the most that looked. I mean, he looked visibly frustrated. Obviously, when there were chances going down, that one that Jaiswal dropped in the gully. Rohit Sharma, turns from second slip and just, punches the air, really annoyed. The way he's batting, he looks kind of indecisive. I don't know. It's worrying, I think.
I think the biggest concern factor for Indian fans out there is they had the Sky camera come down at drinks at one point. India were in the field, must have been in the second innings, I think. Virat and Bumrah were in Rohit's ear as they went to the drinks break. They were very animated. They were gesticulating. They really wanted to get his attention and get a point across. And with the camera right next to them, Rohit waved them both away and walked off by himself, clearly agitated. So there is something there that is not quite gelling in that Indian side. And look, I don't want to heap misery on Rohit Sharma because he's a fantastic cricketer and he has been a tremendous leader for India in the past. But since he has come, the fact is, under Bumrah, they won the first test and they looked like a really together unit. They looked fantastic. They looked like they were really enjoying each other's company. Since then, they haven't won a test. Australia dominated them in Brisbane and didn't win the game. Australia weren't dominant in this game, but they were in front of the 8 ball most of the way, and they won in Adelaide. So, the fact is that as a captain in this series, Rohit is 0 for 3 in terms of winning test matches. He's lost 2, drawn 1, and they looked like a more cohesive. They looked like they were enjoying themselves more. They looked like they were having fun. And it's always easier to have fun when a strike bowler rips the heart out of the other team's middle order and shows it to them. But they just looked like they were a more together unit in that first test under Jasprit Bumrah.
Yeah, I mean, that's one way to look at it. I think the Australian batters have clocked on after the first 5 days or however many days that first test was, and they've played a lot better. Well, definitely Head, and then these two have followed on, the likes of Konstas and who else scored runs? Marnus Labuschagne scored a couple of runs. I think that when you're talking about Jasprit Bumrah and you actually ask the question, is he on thin ice? You asked the question
about Rohit.
About Rohit. And look, I don't think he's on thin ice, but the problem is in terms of it's actually water now. But the problem is that he can walk on water. And then in the sort of Indian eyes, he'll be there until he decides to retire. I'm not sure that his position will ever be up for debate, especially while he's captain. So look, his captaincy is his decision making, the tactics that he's engaged, even back to the New Zealand series when we were talking about that, are a little bit maybe not out of the normal rule book or coaching manual that we have, but I don't know. I think he's all right. I don't think he's actually in trouble. I think in this situation, the biggest thing that I had was that he went out there to try and blunt a new ball. That's not his job. He's out there to score runs and get them off to a fast start.
Ironically, the best guy to do that is the guy that they dropped from opening the batting in this series. And look, I'll be flippant here for a second. I actually had my wife come into the room and ask who Karl Rahul was because I think we're being punked by the Fox team, the commentary team, because they have pronounced his name differently every time they've used it in this series. And we've seen a lot of KL Rahul because he's been terrific opening the batting for India through these first 3 tests. He's actually looked, other than Jaiswal, like their best bat in this series, certainly the most consistent alongside Nitish Kumar Reddy. But he's the guy that you want blunting the attack early doors. And then,
And maybe Shubman Gill, who wasn't selected.
And potentially Shubman Gill. But if you wanted a guy to come in with 30 overs to go to get you 6 and over, ironically, that guy is Rohit, right? Alongside Washington and Jadeja and Nitish Kumar Reddy and all the other lower order players that they've got. So I think, again, India might have missed a trick there in shuffling the only thing that was really working for them so far this series.
I would have loved to. I mean, let's get on to some positive stuff. But I would have loved to see them. Remember when Jaiswal in that New Zealand, one of those New Zealand tests, they needed a low score, and he just came out and just bullied New Zealand. Obviously, it didn't we got the wicket and we won that game. but I would have loved to see them put some pressure on the Australian bowlers in those first 25 overs. And who knows, we might still be saying the same thing. They might still have been 30 for 3, but it would have been very, very interesting.
Oh, I disagree, though. I think you had to earn the right against that bowling attack to get on top. And India got themselves to a position, actually in both innings of this test match, where they were on top of the Australians for periods of time, and they were on top from overs 40 to 80 in the batting innings.
They shouldn't have lost this game. At the end of the day,
no,
they
absolutely.
lost 7 for 43 in
that final session.
Final session, they shouldn't have lost this
That
game.
should not have happened.
Yeah.
And one moment was the turning point.
Why don't we talk about some of the positives then and some of the exciting young players kind of, step up in this game? And I think the first one, we go right back to the first innings of this game and Konstas. I mean, we were excited about him. I think, before the test, I saw him in that A game, and I think that was the first time I'd kind of seen him bat live. And I was messaging Raj at the time, sort of saying, this guy's bat, he's fearless. He's got no concerns about playing this Indian side. I don't think Bumrah was playing in that game.
He wasn't.
But the other guys were playing, and he was just not concerned about like the step up. You could see he wanted it. And then in all the lead up, again, he talked a massive game, but then he walks out in the first innings, tries the lap in the third over, misses, tries it in the fifth over, misses, but then in the seventh over, plays one, goes for 4, plays a reverse 6, another one for a boundary. How exciting is this for you, Baldy, to kind of see a 19-year-old come in with this much excitement and then actually, get the game off to a flying start for Australia?
It was a very, very special innings to watch. A kid on debut, it couldn't have been more starkly contrast from Nathan McSweeney's debut, who is a fine cricketer, and I'm sure we'll see McSweeney in an Australian jersey again at some stage over the course of his career. But to see Konstas come out and just be absolutely fearless in terms of trying all of those things that you suggested, including running down the wicket at both opening bowlers, including trying to go over cover, go over mid-on, go over deep square leg on the charge, it just shows that he has absolutely no fear. We also need to have a little bit of circumspection here in that it's not going to be that way every test match. Okay, we have to prepare ourselves for the possibility, the possible eventuality that, just like Michael Slater did in the 90s, he will run down the wicket on the third ball of the test match and get clean bowled and look a bit silly. But I think if test cricket in 2023-24 has taught us anything, it's that maybe that's okay. And maybe if he comes off more often than not, and he still averages 35, 40, whatever we ask of him as a test opener, having him as a foil for Khawaja or whoever opens the batting after Khawaja with him in test cricket is a wonderful possibility, a wonderful potential way forward for Australia. I'm not convinced that it'll come off every time, but just watching the kid, it was one of the most exciting debuts I've seen in my lifetime. And it was awe-inspiring to watch this kid just play with absolutely no fear in his heart.
Yeah, it was. I was very excited. You could tell by the messages I was sending, but I'm a traditionalist. I love Test cricket. I love the way that it's played, but this feels like it's a different time now. We've got to start reconsidering what is okay and what's not. Exhibit A is how did Konstas get out in both innings? He got out playing front foot defensive shot in both innings. Maybe playing a shot like that, a ramp over the slips for him is actually a percentage shot. His whole cricketing life, that has been a viable option. All he has to do is get a little bit on it, and there's no one back there. There's no fielders back there. So I'm willing to actually, at a later time, actually thinking about this and maybe we do a pod on it. What is actually Test cricket look like? What does a specialist opener look like? I don't know if it is what Sunil Gavaskar was or these other sort of openers that were in the game. One thing about Konstas, as you mentioned, is attitude. Love it or hate it, it's not an act. That is 100% who he is, and I actually really love it. He's just not putting someone on a pedestal like Jasprit Bumrah. I think I sent you that little snapshot where it was like, what are you going to do to prepare against Jasprit Bumrah? Nothing really. I might read a little bit of the scouting report, but maybe not. And then the best one was when he had that spider cam come down, and then he said, hopefully, or something to the effect of, hopefully they bring back Bumrah so I can continue to put pressure on him, or something along those lines. I really like the attitude. I think it did wonders for those batting around him. Kawaja and Labuschagne especially, they benefited from having someone out there putting the Indians back on their heels, and Marnus not having to come in, and he came in the 21st over rather than the first over, made a big difference. So.
Well, not only did it make a huge difference, but when he came in, they were 89 or whatever it was for one, and Kawaja was going along at a strike rate of 70 or 75 there for a long while, not really having to do much. He wasn't having to shoulder the load of the scoring. He could just tuck the ball around the corner and take one. He could play an innings that was well within his comfort zone, but still continued to tick the score along. And I think Australia really benefited from having another opening partner with Kawaja that could get them off to a flyer, as DW had done in the past. But genuinely, it changed the complexion of how Australia batted in that innings, because all of a sudden they were 100 for one. And look, I have to talk about match awareness a little bit on the pod, because I have to pump the brakes on some of the Australian love, because yes, there is an opportunity to be fearless in Test cricket, but if you're not that guy, you have to be hyper aware of how the match is unfolding, and you have to take responsibility for putting your team in a position to succeed. And I think as good as innings as Marnus had to get to 70 odd, that first ball after the drinks break going into the last hour of play was completely irresponsible for him to just slap that down mid-off's throat. That was not the right shot to play in that circumstance, and he had to take it on himself to go big and be the guy who scored a big 100. As it turned out, Steve Smith got 140 and sort of bailed him out. But that was a really irresponsible shot. The other super irresponsible shot in that first innings, and Australia were trying to put pressure back on India, they'd already lost 2 wickets in a clump, was Mitchell Marsh had a ball go flying past his shoulder. Again, it was Bumrah, no surprises there. And then 3 balls later, he's decided he's got another ball in the same area and tried to hoik it over mid-wicket, and all he did was nick off to the wicketkeeper. Showed a complete lack of match awareness in that situation. He had to take some responsibility for getting Australia's innings back on track. As it was, he exposed Carey and he exposed Pat Cummins to an Indian team that was revived at 5 for 240. As it was, Carey batted well. Pat Cummins batted really, really well in this test match, scored 100 runs in the test, and Australia were able to go on. But had that not have happened, it would have been entirely down to those 2 cricketers not having any match awareness. So while it's fun and fantastic and frolic to go and thrash the ball around the place, you still kind of have to be aware of the situation and what your role is within the team. And I think those guys let India back into the game a little bit in that situation.
Just quickly on your point on Konstas, I was listening on the radio when in the second innings when he was batting, and he was much more circumspect in that second innings, I thought. I mean, good ball from Bumrah, forward defensive, maybe, hindsight, he doesn't leave that little gap, but good delivery. A lot of people are getting out to that ball. They were talking a lot about how he has showed a real application at times when it's been needed in various forms of the game over the past 12 months of things. So, we will see. They're going to go to Sri Lanka. I imagine he's going to, he's obviously going to keep his spot for Sydney. I imagine he'll also be in Sri Lanka. And we'll see in those games, he's going to have a completely different challenge if it's anything like what we saw, for New Zealand over in Sri Lanka. So, yeah, he's going to get tested pretty much straight away.
There is that gap there between bat and pad. It's always there, and he's pressing forward. But I actually think even in the first innings, even though he did go off with a bang, he actually settled down towards the hour mark and started playing some really good cricket shots and turning the strike over, not just sort of block bashing. So I think that he does have some game awareness, and it's really good to see from someone, so young. And
he's 19. He's got so much time in the international game to find out how he's going to fix that little flaw maybe that he has around off stump with the ball coming back into him. But, what 19-year-old doesn't have, what 19-year-old has a perfect game? I mean, Jaiswal's game's pretty good, and he's 22, 23, but...
Can we go back to the Mitch Marsh? You did touch on his batting there. What about his bowling? He didn't really get thrown the pill?
No, and that's the concern, I think, in that he hasn't contributed this series with the bat other than his second innings in Perth where he got 47. He hasn't got past... In fact, I don't think he's got into double figures for the rest of the series. He hasn't taken many wickets in this series. look, I'm going to get this stat wrong, but you'd have to go back a long way to find when he took 3 wickets in an innings for Australia. In fact, I think it was the Ashes in 2018 where he bowled. I think it's the only time he's bowled more than 12 overs in an innings, and it was the only time that he's taken more than 3 wickets in an innings. He got 5 for in that particular game. For a wee while now, he hasn't been a heavy contributor with the ball for Australia. And I think at times in this series, we've really needed him to stand up and bowl 10 or 12 good overs, like we've seen Cameron Green do for Australia in the past. And I think what it's showing us is actually just how good a cricketer Cameron Green is with bat and ball, and how much we're missing him at the moment, because Marsh is now averaging under 30. I think you had a look at some of the stats. He's averaging over 40 with the ball. So he's minus 12 as an all-rounder. Neither of those disciplines are strong enough to warrant his place in the team on their own. And I think the combined package is also not... He's not saving games for Australia. He's not winning games for Australia at the number 6 position in the all-rounder position. He's not contributing heavily with the bat, and he's also not contributing heavily with the ball. He's actually been preferred... Well, they preferred Travis Head over him in terms of going to a guy who's trying to take wickets. They gave the ball to Marnus Labuschagne to bowl 1 over a bounces before tea. I would expect that would be your 5th bowler taking those options. So I think for Australia, Mitchell Marsh is a terrific white ball cricketer at the top of the order. He still he's the white ball captain, has been the white ball captain for a couple of series. He is still super valuable to Australia. I think Australia need to go in a different direction for a wee while in terms of their test cricket with their all-rounder, the guy at number 6. I think it should be by Webster. I think Alex Carey is in good enough form at the moment that he could bat at 6 for a period of time and give the guy coming in a position at 7 and have more of a bowling all-rounder to give their other guys a little bit more support, because back-to-back, Australia's bowlers in Sydney are going to need a little bit more support going forward than they're getting from Mitchell Marsh at the moment. Whether it's injury or whether or not he's just not preferred as an option, either way, Australia need to get more out of their number 6. And I love Mitchell Marsh as a cricketer. I mean, 5 years ago, he was the most hated cricketer in Australia, I think. Now he's probably one of the most loved cricketers in Australia. But at the moment, his form is not warranting a place in the team.
Can we go to another young star now on the Indian side, Nitish Kumar Reddy? I mean, again, we're talking about game awareness and all that kind of stuff. I think that personally is what shone through in his innings. You know, him and Sundar. Australia was well on top at that situation. You know, at that point in the game, and he's been a player in this series that has shone. He's come in and done good things, but it's always been in a situation where he's been batting with the tail usually, or he's going for quick runs. He's doing the kind of 20-20, I'm going to try and smash some quick runs before this is all over. This was an innings of real substance, and they earned the right to then kick on and score at a run a ball and really revitalised India back into this game from a position where it looked like they were in huge trouble.
Yeah, I mean, we've just talked about Mitch Marsh. He's almost the opposite in a way, in that you can really trust him with the bat at the moment. He's been consistently scoring runs. I mean, he's been getting to 40 and getting out and sometimes being left not out. But he has scored runs, and he hasn't been worried about playing cricket in Australia, which is very different to what he would be accustomed to. I was very surprised to learn he was only 21, a few weeks ago when I looked at him. He looks a lot more sort of accomplished and experienced than he is, and it was good to see him go ahead and score those runs. They talk about having a fast bowling all-round or a medium pace all-rounder, them being sort of worth their weight in gold. I'm not sure he's sort of locked that in for the Australian team at the moment, but it was really good to see him go and score that 100. There was some real good pictures with him and his family as well.
Yeah,
so
the stories about his dad are cool, right?
Yeah, I mean, he has been a thorn in Australia's side in this series, and I've love-hated watching him bat because I he's a number 8. We should be able to get this guy out. Australia,
yeah, that's been your thing the whole time. We got to clean up the tail, but he's much better than a number 8.
He can bat maybe not anywhere in the top 6, but he could certainly bat at 6 for India going forward. Absolutely could bat. He is good enough that he could play as a batter for India going forward.
It's looking that way, isn't it?
Isn't it? And if they didn't already have a full top 6, I think he'd be in there already as a number 6. As it is, they've got him in at 7 or 8, bowling a few overs. And I think that's probably where he's going to end up sitting for India as a batting all-rounder, maybe can develop. If he can develop another yard of pace, I think he'd be super handy for India. As it is at the moment, he's sort of mid 120s ish. If he can get sort of up above 130, 334 k's an hour, or develop a little bit of swing with the ball. Unfortunately, we haven't seen him swing the ball here because he just hasn't got the ball early enough in any innings where the ball could be swinging. So I think we need to see him with a Dukes or an SG or something like that where the ball potentially could be doing something for a period of time to see whether or not he's got, value in England or value in New Zealand potentially where the ball might do a little bit for a little bit longer. And if he does, then look out because he has got some serious chops as an international cricketer coming up, that guy.
I think he could. I think, Sundar and Reddy, that could be 6 and 7 for, in 12 months' time in this test team. I don't think that's wildly out of the realms. I mean, really, that's only 1 or 2 spots higher. They could even go higher, 5 or 6 sort of range. If we're thinking that in 12 months' time, we might not have Rohit in the side, we might not have Kohli in the side. We don't know when these guys are going to end. It does look like it will be sometime soon in Test cricket at least. So yeah, I mean he's just gone from strength to strength in the series, and like I said before, the fact that he turned these nice little impressive 40s into a real innings of substance was I mean, that's got to be super exciting. I mean, Indian fans will be hurting right now from the result of this game, but that's got to be super exciting for going forward for them.
Yeah, 100%. I think, we've mentioned Test cricket here, but he has a lot of application across the white ball game as well, where he really is worth his weight in gold if he can bowl some overs and score some runs very quickly.
Can we talk about one more Indian batter? He's probably the batter that I felt the most for in this Test match, and that's Yashasvi Jaiswal, because his second innings that he played, I thought was one of the best fourth innings of an overseas player that I have seen in Australia in some time. Maybe since Lara. His fourth innings defiance of Australia, who were just piling the pressure on. His team was 30 for 3 going into lunch. It was basically him and punt. He had to go on and make a big score if India were to be any chance in this game. And he played and missed, and he played and missed, and he played and missed, and he didn't drop his guard. He didn't try and head his way out of trouble. He was playing an innings that was so far out of his normal shot-making character. It was I'm sure it was completely foreign to him in his young career to have to go and do that role. But he did it so well, and he impressed me so much. I really felt for him getting out in the way that he did, and to have India fall over after he got out will leave a very bitter taste in his mouth. But at the end of the series and the end of his career, he'll look back on this innings, I think, as being one of the most influential in him being able to stand up, not just in good conditions where he can smash it everywhere, but even when the going gets tough. We know now that Jaiswal gets going, and I'm full of praise for that kid and what he can do on the cricket field, because that was an outstanding innings from him.
He looked awesome in that first innings as well, didn't he? Until, that changed that first innings for India as well. That run out. I mean, they were cruising, him and Kohli. They were starting to actually put pressure on the Australian bowlers. That run out just completely, again, changed kind of the direction, the momentum of this game.
I've never seen so much debate over a run out either. Everyone's trying to blame Kohli. Everyone's trying to blame Jaiswal. No one can come up with a solution as to what.
Well, both his dismissals. I mean, do we need to talk about the shambles that was his dismissal? I mean, I think we can all agree it was out, wasn't it? But the second innings dismissal, it's gone straight off his glove or the face of the bat, maybe even, and gone to the wicket keeper.
Yeah, I think we arrived at the correct decision in the end.
What's happened with the technology there?
Look, the technology has let us down. This is the problem with technology, right? If we rely on it,
says two technology experts.
It's not perfect.
And then that's the problem. It's not perfect. It can be different in different situations. The big one for me, though, just stepping back from that, was that it was given not out in the first place. Yeah. I don't know. I'm not sure why it was. It looked fairly
big deflection. Big deflection. There's nothing, unless it's come off his arm, there's nothing else there to warrant that deflection going to the wicketkeeper, because it's come from over the wicket at the badge and then it's been taken a long way down the leg side.
Yeah.
There was quite clearly a big deflection there, and the only thing that it could have been is his arm guard. And Jaiswal wears his arm guard a long way up his arm. So for that to be the case, you would have thought that if it came off the front of his arm guard, it would have popped more.
It would have made the same noise stuff, you know what I mean?
Could have.
In terms of the technology. But, the technology has been a little bugbear of mine for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
And even you sent that one earlier, I'm not sure which batsman it was, the left-handed batsman was showing the DRS.
That was Jaiswal. That was Jaiswal given not out, and then Australia reviewed it. That would have been a huge LBW if he had been given out. And there was
Marnus's one in the third innings as well.
Yep.
Given not out, looked very, very out, from live and then on the DRS. And again, kind of Marnus went on to score another 50-odd runs, I think.
Yeah, I complained about some with Kane Williamson in the last series that they went on that I thought went against the opposition. I think that there is what I liked. Well, let's just get to the end of this. What I liked was that common sense prevailed, and that the TV umpire was able to overall go, I don't know what's wrong with technology. That is out, and gave them out.
Yeah, I mean, Indian fans won't necessarily like that there was no spike on the technology and that he was still given out. I think independent fans of the game
watch that ball and think it was
and think it's not out. I mean, if it was me and it was an Australian guy, that would hurt. Going, oh, geez, there's nothing on the hotspot, and the technology is inconclusive. Yet the decision was still overturned. Even if that was Smith, and even if Australia had still gone on to lose the Test match, I'd be gutted. But I think I'd have to go, actually, I think that was the right decision at the end of the day.
And the real disappointing thing is that that's the kind of shocker that the system is designed for.
Exactly.
And the technology didn't turn up.
Yeah, exactly. It's not perfect. And if we rely on it like it's perfect, same with every piece of technology, if we rely on it like it's perfect and that it's a replacement for human decision-making, we're in big trouble.
I think we talked about a bunch of young players. I think we have to talk about some of the old stagers who had a real big hand in how this game went. I mean, you mentioned a couple of them before, Baldy. You must be. I mean, we've got excited about Konstas, but we've seen another big 100 from Steve Smith. The Fab Four are showing that they're not quite done yet with Williamson and Root scoring hundreds, Coley scoring 100 a couple of tests ago.
In the series, yeah.
Pat Cummins, I thought, I don't know who was the man of the match in this game. I would have
Cummins.
I would have given it to Cummins as well. Two really crucial innings, especially that second innings one. In Australia were in huge trouble. India had turned that game. That partnership had kind of sparked them. Bumrah again did his thing. I think Siraj bowled the best spell that he's bowled for a long time. And then suddenly, Australia were 91 for 6, and Cummins comes in and plays that kind of innings that he did. And even Labuschagne is starting to get his footwork back. He's starting to, play important, couple of 70s, important knocks in this game.
Marnus has had to fight hard for his runs all series, and I really appreciate the fact that he's continued to do that. He hasn't thrown his wicket away in trying to hit himself back into form. He has persevered. He's done the things that he knows that he's capable of doing. He's, other than slapping the ball to mid-off on day one, has showed pretty good match awareness in that he knows that he needs to fight hard to get into a position where he can start to work his way back into runs. Usman Khawaja the same, had to work really, really hard for his runs in this Test series. He got a 50 in the first innings, didn't go on with it. But those guys have worked really, really hard for their runs. What they've done is they've given the opportunity for Smith and Head and Marsh and Carey and Cummins on a lot of occasions to come in when there's been a platform set to be able to go on and kick on and make a big score. And what Australia have done really well in this series is they have had one guy at least who's gone on and not just got 100, but got 140 or 150, and they've managed to bat around that person deep into the innings. I've lamented Australia not being able to bowl sides out, but in this series, Australia, particularly in this Test match, Australia have done a tremendous job of fighting really, really hard those bottom 4 wickets to make sure that they not just score runs, but keep India out in the field for as long as possible to give their bowlers.
That Lion bowling partnership must have just been
an absolute thorn in the side. And I really felt for India because it's the frustration that I often feel when Australia, this series, Pakistan, West Indies last year, failed to bowl out 9, 10, 11. It is a really, really frustrating experience, and I felt for India in that situation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Smith's innings, actually. I think I was texting a few of you while it was going on. I thought he was going to go really, really big because it was flat.
Yeah.
It was very, very flat. They kind of accelerated towards the end there. I probably would have tried to give them another 20 or 30 overs to keep India in the field for 150 overs and then try and take a few poles. I mean, it worked out in the end. They were 70 odd for 3, I think. But if they had been 100 for none or 100 for 1, it could have been a very different story at the close of play. The other one is, Labuschagne. I've never really been a sort of believer in him. We've talked about it on the pod before. I think, he scores a lot of his runs against maybe weaker opposition, or his big runs against weaker opposition. But he's actually looked really good at times in this series, and he looked very good in that first innings. I think he steered the ship well at 3. So happy for him.
To come back from, I mean, you and I, Baldy, on that fireside chat after that first test, we can relay the conversation that it was basically everyone that on the aftermath of that test was saying you can never pick Marnus again. Like he was leaving the ball. He looked completely gone, to be honest, and to have fought hard enough. And I mean, I don't think fight's ever been a problem for him. You can see how hard he's prepared to work and how hard he's to, even in that game where he looked terrible.
It was 2 off. He survived for 52 balls.
Exactly. So, I think as you just said, he deserves a huge amount of credit for what he did.
Yeah. And there are a lot of knives out for him that wouldn't otherwise ordinarily be out because of the way he puts himself out there. He is a larger-than-life character. He appeals vociferously. He hears noises that other people don't hear. He eats cold toasties. Like, he invites himself into those situations where, given a 50-50, people might go, I don't really identify with that guy.
Yeah.
But I mean, God love a trier, but he really does give Australia everything. And if you have a guy who gives you everything he's got every time he walks onto the field, and a guy who's got slightly more talent but doesn't try as hard when he really, really should be and isn't up for the fight, I'll take the guy that's up for the fight every time. You need at least one of those guys in your team, in every cricket team, even if it's for no other reason, that you do need some comic relief at various points, in long days in the field.
Might get you there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I like this. I like the Elvis Presley when he's facing up to bat. I can't do it with this side of my mouth, but
he's very talented. I'm going to ask you to put a hat on, not just to cover up the thing on your head, but put an Australian selector's hat on.
Yeah.
You talked about knives out. If Khawaja doesn't return an innings of substance, I'll let you on. You can define what substance is.
Yeah.
If he doesn't return an innings of substance, is Nathan, is McSweeney and Konstas going on the next tour?
No, I don't think so. I think Khawaja's earned enough points in the bank, and both of those guys have a young enough start to their test career that Khawaja probably will still go to Sri Lanka. The World Test Championship final is still up for grabs, and I think Australia need to put their best foot forward. That Sri Lanka series is not a dead rubber in the sense that we want to go there and blood young players. I think they will have both eyes firmly set on winning both of those test matches in Sri Lanka and going to the final at Lords. There's only one spot up for grabs now to be able to do that. So I think Australia still have a lot to play for. And I think Khawaja is still the best positioned of the Australian openers to lead that opening batting partnership to go on that tour. After that, who knows what will happen. I think he is going to need enough runs at some point to keep himself in the picture. I don't think he could sustain a long period going into the Ashes next year of poor form. So he needs scores at some point, but he has enough runs in the bank at the moment, I think, to go on that tour to Sri Lanka at the very least. And if he doesn't score then we've got a real problem because we've already discarded Nathan McSweeney after 3 test matches as a potential test opener. We look like we've found one in Sam Constance. But if we need another one, who are we going to go to? Because we've already given a vote of no confidence in Marcus Harris. We've already given a vote of no confidence in Cameron Bancroft. We've already given a vote of no confidence in Matt Renshaw. There aren't that many more opening batters in Australia that we haven't, that we've looked at yet. We're going to have to go and find another one somewhere if we don't go back to the McSweeney well. So it's a really interesting question, Raj, going forward.
And then just on McSweeney, I know Big Bash isn't a great indicator of Test match ability, but he's looked really good since he's gone back into the BBL. There was 170 odd he got to guide his team home. He's looked really good. That level above that we were talking about with Konstas. I think he actually is.
Yeah. He's a really good cricketer. I mean, at domestic level, he dominates in Australia the way you would expect a guy who's got test aspirations to be able to do so. He's had an introduction to Test cricket that is about as hard as it gets. Nathan McSweeney. He is facing a bowler who is not potentially. He's the best bowler in the world. He is potentially the best bowler of the 21st century, if not certainly the best bowler of the 21st century.
His numbers, 71 wickets or whatever, this calendar year is the best ever.
By a fast bowler?
Yeah.
And I don't think it's the most wickets, but the average is phenomenal. It's under 15 for this year.
And I'm pretty sure he's the first bowler ever to 200 wickets, averaging less than 20.
That's
Jasprit
correct.
Bumrah.
Yeah.
So
people have been faster than him, but his average is off the chart.
He is all time. We are witnessing all time greatness at the moment, particularly if you think about how much better he has looked than his counterparts in the Indian team, who are no slouches. Like Siraj has bowled well in this series. Harshit Rana has bowled well.
I think Siraj has bowled a couple of good spells. I don't know that he's bowled sustained periods.
No, and that's the problem. They haven't been sustained good periods of bowling for sessions on end like Australia have been. Australia have been very disciplined in this series. Their main three quicks, whoever the combination is, whether it's Hazelwood or Boland or Stark or Cummins or whoever, they have, in this series, more than I've ever seen them before in Australian conditions, been sustained pressure no matter what the situation is. Yes, they've been flat at times when opposition have been batting well, but they have been really, really disciplined in this series. And that has been the difference, I think, between the two sides at the moment, is that Australia's bowlers have put their batters under more pressure than the Indian bowlers have. But in periods, some of those Indian bowlers have bowled really, really well. But Jasprit Bumrah is head and shoulders above everybody else in this series.
I don't think you'd be, if you're Mohammad Siraj, you'd be disappointed with his numbers. He's got 16 wickets at 31. I mean, that's an okay return. You look at the rest of the bowlers, and I guess this is sort of where I kind of start to think what's been different from sort of previous series that India have gone to Australia and sort of won. And there's a big gap missing in that premier sort of spin role. No one's really taken the game by the horns when it comes to spin bowling. You've got Washington Sundar, who's new on the side. He's been all right. He hasn't been extremely effective.
Barely bowled in this game, didn't he?
You've got Ravi Jadeja, who's never really going to be your overseas spinner that's going to go and take you a bunch of wickets at a low average. That just leaves Ravi Ashwin, and he didn't really get much of a game, and he's now retired. So
it
there's a big gap there.
It continues to defy belief. You imagine how different the complexion of this series would be if you had Ashwin had 15 to 20 wickets at an average of low 20s, 24, 25, and a strike rate of 50 odd. That would put the ball firmly in India's favour. Have you got the bowling stats there? Have you got Lions stats? What are his bowling stats?
So this doesn't have this game in it, I don't think, but he only had 6 wickets. So I think he got 2 in the second innings.
2 in the second innings, 2 for 37 off 20 and a bit.
Bowled really well, I thought. Actually, both innings, I thought he bowled really well in this test.
I mean, it's not that Lyon has bowled poorly in the series at all. He's been really, really good for Australia. But Ashwin, if he had 15 to 20 wickets at 24, India would be 2-1 up easily in the series. You know what I mean? They have missed him so much compared to what he was able to give them on previous tours, where he dominated his opposition counterpart in all of those series that he played.
Oh, I mean, look, he's a fantastic bowler. It's, you guys talked about him last week, his retirement. It's sad for me that's happened, because I've loved watching him over the years, because he's always kind of got something up his sleeve. He was, obviously bowled off spin. He was a bowler that could do so many things that I could never do in terms of different deliveries and all sorts of stuff. But I think it's his brain that I've always enjoyed the most. He's always thinking, that's annoyed some people sometimes when he's doing mad cads and various other things that, and bother, fans of the other teams. But he's always trying to plot a way to get the opposition out. And I was staggered really that he didn't play that first test. We talked about it at the time. Sundar, I mean, I think he's going to be a good cricketer for them. He's shown in that New Zealand series, he's shown with the bat, at least in this series, that he can contribute. But I don't know. It hasn't been much of a series for spinners. So, you could argue that maybe it hasn't made a huge difference. I don't know. But, certainly, like you said, if they had Ashwin to kind of pick out, it feels like Ashwin always found a way to get a wicket when you really needed one. He would figure out, okay, this guy's doing this. I'd have loved to see him bowl to Konstas. I mean, Jadeja got him in the end and didn't actually take him that long to get him, with that straight delivery. But yeah, he'd be a fun one to see bat against Ashwin, because I think both their minds would just be going a million miles an hour. Should we kind of move on to, before we, I guess, finish this Australia-India series, how do they turn this around in Sydney? I mean, we traditionally expect it's going to be a bit more spin-friendly at the SCG. That's what everyone says when you go to Australia. That's what, the Sydney Test, you might play two spinners. Even New Zealand on their last tour ended up playing two spinners, although the selection in that game was completely out of whack in terms of what New Zealand did. But how do India, because I think this loss from India mentally, I think hurts them a lot, actually. They've come back in previous Border Gavaskars from, 36 all out, other situations where it felt like this is going to hurt them mentally, and they've bounced back really, really well. I don't know. This doesn't feel good to me, and I don't know. I'm struggling to think on what they can actually change to produce a better result.
Well, I mean, for me, it's never going to be skills with these guys. It's their mental approach to this. They've played a lot of this series like they've had a weight on their shoulder, and they've just been on the ropes for a lot of it. I mean, really, it's lucky not to be 3-1 after this far through the series. I think they need to go out there and play like a team that actually doesn't have much to lose here. They would love to win this game, draw this series, keep the trophy, but they just need to approach the game a little bit differently. Like I don't think I'm thinking back to a while back, the India team. If we look back 24 months, they would not have approached this run chase today in the same fashion. They need to recapture that sort of mindset that's made them really good over the last decade. And yeah, I think that's what they need to change. It's not a skills level. They're the best in their position and whatever they're doing. Sometimes in world cricket, some of these guys, it's a mindset thing.
I completely agree. And I think it's got to start at the top. It's got to start with the senior players. Rohit, as the captain, has got to stamp his authority. If he's going to open the batting, he's got to come out and open the batting like Rohit opens the batting. There's no point, unless you're trying to save a draw, there's no point in him coming out and batting in that first innings and being 9 off 39. There is absolutely 0 point. He has got to go out and lay a marker down, and he's got to take on. If it's Boland, he's got to hit Boland off his length. If it's Stark, he's got to hit Stark off his length. He's got to be aggressive against those Australian bowlers and take them out of the equation. If it's Lyon, he's got to take Lyon downtown and take him out of the attack. Force Australia to bowl their fifth bowler, who we have got 0 from so far in this series. They have got to start dictating terms to Australia, because if they do, they can win the Sydney Test match. There are periods in every single Test match in this series where India have been in the game. They had Australia 6 for 90 in this second innings, and if they had taken one more wicket, they could have been chasing 250 instead of 330. There are moments in this series where if India had been switched on, they could have won this Test match. India dropped 3 catches in that. Costly. They were like, as good as Jaiswal has been in this series, they were 3 really costly drops that probably cost India, I have no idea what the stats are, but let's say it's 80 runs. That is a really big difference between chasing 240 and 320.
Even Bumrah's no ball.
There are key moments where India, if they have a little bit of luck go their way and they have a slightly different attitude and they win those key moments, we could be looking at 2-all.
I would love to bring a different point of view, but I think it is all the mindset stuff. The one thing that stood out to me the most was the night watchman. I really just did not understand that in that situation.
Like 25 minutes to go.
25 minutes to go, and they were, as we said, they were dominating Australia. I mean, they'd they'd gifted them the Jaiswal run out, and suddenly they brought in Akashdeep, who, I don't know how you expect him to 20. Like, he's not a defensive player. He's, they don't have a tail end player to bring in who can do the Ajaz Patel role, or even Willow Rourke, who we've seen for New Zealand, who will just stand there and do the sewing machine and defend it. Whereas, they should have just come out with a positive attitude, kept batting, bring in Rishabh Pant. He would have been totally fine in those conditions, and keep going. I think that actually ended up getting Kohli out, and then Akashdeep got out anyway, because it sort of brought, we're completely on top, to, oh no, now we have to defend, and now we have to completely change our mindset. And I think that's what cost them in the first session of their second dig. I don't know. They just need to play with some positivity, and now they're forced to. I think if we're going to transition now to what South Africa has done and put themselves in that World Test Championship final, this is India's last chance. It's their last test. They have to win, and then hope that Australia get done by Sri Lanka over in Sri Lanka, or I don't know. I don't quite know the permutations. I haven't had a chance to sit down and look at them all. But they have to go out again to win this series. To retain that trophy, they have to go and win this game, and they're going to have to try and put Australia on the back foot to do that.
Yeah, having to win this game actually works in India's favour, in that they have to make the running in this test match, and they have to be aggressive in so doing. So I think the situation is set up for a better Indian performance. I don't think we should see any wholesale changes to the lineup. If India are going to go in with Rohit Sharma as their captain, then they shouldn't change their team. The only way that they should change their team is if they decide that they need Shubman Gill instead of Rohit Sharma batting at 3, and then they move KL Rahul back up to open the batting, which I don't think they're going to do. Yeah,
KL Rahul, I don't want to see him batting at 3. I want to see Shubman Gill there, or even Safraz hasn't been used this tournament, this series, but I think he'd actually be really good in Australia, just sitting on his back foot. But yeah, I just think that they need to go in with a clear sort of plan of how they're going to attack this game, and intent is the key. Look at Sam, Konstas as an example. He went out there with the intent to just take it to them. He was not going to sit there and block outside off stump
and wait for a ball with his name on it.
He's not going to do that. And you can't tell me that he's able to do that 10 times better than someone like Rohit Sharma. Rohit Sharma is a world-class opening batsman. He has been for a long time. Go out there and hit the ball.
Yep, 100% agree.
So let's move on to South Africa, because I know, firstly, I started, complete openness. I didn't follow every ball of this South Africa-Pakistan game. I tuned in kind of right when it was all crumbling for South Africa last night. Their wickets just fell. They were chasing 150. When I tuned in, that looked like Bavuma was going to get them home, just sort of knocking it around. And then the wickets start to tumble, and suddenly they go from, a position where it looks like they're going to walk into the World Test Championship final with a win against Pakistan. They're 50 runs behind and they're 8 down. Enter Kagiso Rabada, who, when you're talking about best bowlers of the 21st century, someone that probably doesn't get enough credit is Kagiso Rabada. I think got his 300th wicket the other day. He's been phenomenal, but steps in with the bat and starts playing these extravagant shots. Him and Janssen put on 50, huge excitement. They win that game, and they are now in the World Test Championship final. And the uproar, there's been sort of both sides of this debate has come up. One, everyone, or lots of people are rapt to see a side like South Africa, who have been are not the big glory names of Test cricket currently. Over the past few years, they have not been. It's obviously the big three of India, Australia, and England that get all of the headlines. The other side of that coin is people going, oh, this is kind of ridiculous that South Africa punted on the series against New Zealand, sent what was it, about this time last year? They sent a second-rate side to New Zealand because they wanted to prioritise their domestic T20 competition. The teams that they've beaten along the way have been the West Indies, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and now they've beaten Pakistan. They did draw 1-1 with India at home. I think that isn't really their fault. But where do we kind of stand on I don't know, all of this debate and South Africa being the first team to lock into the World Test Championship final?
Do you want to go first, Raj?
You go first.
Okay. It is fantastic for South Africa, who have been struggling to make money out of their cricketing setup, to have an opportunity to go to Lords and potentially win a World Test Championship final for a couple of reasons. One, it will be a huge boon for cricket in that country. Two, if they win, it will finally release the shackles of tournament after tournament after tournament of going to semi-finals and finals and being always the bridesmaid.
Which they've done this year with the T20, or in the past 12 months with the ODI World Cup and the T20 World Cup final.
Exactly. So it will be fantastic for them if they are able to go on to win to do that. I think the detractors, though, are the arguments that, one, they haven't beaten anyone of substance, certainly haven't beaten anyone of substance away, and two, that at best they punted the New Zealand series. At worst, they disrespected Test cricket by not sending the best possible side to play in a Test match. I think that is the thing that sticks in the craw of many, many fans of Test cricket around the world, and it just shows how imperfect the World Test Championship system is, right? It is fantastic that we are talking about this as something that we are all passionate about and we care about and we want to have work. That is a great outcome for the World Test Championship. Regardless of who wins it now, people are going to be talking about this as a thing, which is great. Unfortunately, I don't think South Africa are going to this tournament being one of the best two or even best three cricket sides in the world over the last 2.5 years. And I think that's a problem. I think the thing that keeps sticking in my craw is that they neglected Test cricket to save their own country's cricket financially. It was in very dire straits and they had to do it. So there's no, that's the problem that they've been put in. They've been put between a rock and a hard place. They prioritised trying to save cricket financially in that country, which they had to do, but they disrespected Test cricket and now they've been rewarded with a spot in the World Test Championship final. And something about that doesn't sit right for me. But you can't take away from the players who have played the schedule that's in front of them, have played, other than the New Zealand series, even David Bedingham played really, really well in that New Zealand series, have played really, really well over this last 2 years, and player for player deserve their spot. But there's something wrong with the system if South Africa are the first team to qualify. There's something wrong with that system because they are not in the top three teams at the moment in world cricket, as far as I'm concerned. They haven't proven it, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, playing devil's advocate, most tournament season-long formats, you don't always get the best teams in the final.
No, fair point.
That's not always the case. But I have to let all of this go through to the keeper, all of this World Test Championship stuff, because there's just no equity in, one, the number of games played, and two, home and away series. I don't know how we can compare or put someone up on a pedestal in the championship final when they haven't played each other home and away.
Yeah.
There needs to be some equity in the number of tests that are counting towards this point table and who they're playing.
Have South Africa played Australia or England at all in this cycle?
I don't
I'm not sure that they've even played Australia and England.
No, I don't think so. I don't think they have. They played India at home and it was 1-1. It was a great series, actually.
Yeah, they've done terrifically well. There's nothing. I have nothing against the South African team that has played the schedule that's in front of them and won the games of cricket that they have been scheduled. The problem is with the scheduling. And I think it seems unfair if you have a look at the totality of Test cricket over the last 2.5 years and you think about the awesome Indian team that's gone through that period, the exciting play that England have had, the consistency that Australia have put on the park throughout that period, and 2 out of those 3 sides are going to miss the final. And South Africa have not played under the radar. They've won a lot of Test matches in a row, but they haven't played Australia at all, if I'm right. They haven't played England at all, if I'm right, in this World Test.
They have played New Zealand.
And they punted the series away to New Zealand. So other than beating India at home, they haven't really played any cricketing powerhouses in this cycle. Not their fault, but something needs to be done about the scheduling if we're going to avoid a recurrence of this going forward. And I don't know how we do it.
And look, I mean, I loved it when New Zealand made the final, but it was a similar situation. We were able to benefit from winning all our games at home, and sometimes not against the toughest opposition in cricket at the time. I will push back that I think South Africa have a pretty good case for being in the top 3 sides in world cricket at the moment. Again, it's very hard because it's hard to prove that.
It's impossible to prove, but if you play 10 test matches between South Africa and England, 5 in South Africa and 5 in England, how many does South Africa win? They win more than 5?
I would back them to, actually.
You think they win more than 5 test matches against England?
I think they would. You're giving England a lot of credit here, but let's remember that England went, tough series, but they went over to Pakistan and got,
2-1.
hammered in those last 2 games.
2-1.
And they lost to India very convincingly.
Away.
But New Zealand's just won 3-0 over in India.
Mm-hmm. How did England go against New Zealand?
Every chance I can.
Okay.
But I don't know. South Africa has been the fact that they lost, the fact they sent that the second 11 over to play New Zealand. I think I completely agree that it feels frustrating that they can do that and still make it.
Well, they were penalised for it, right? They lost.
Yeah, they lost the games, and they were able to do that and still make it. But I think if you look at the totality of what they've done, particularly over the last 12 months, they've been in all formats. They've been a very good side, and you see Janssen, you see Rabada, you see Bavuma, who I think is a little bit underrated in terms of the runs that he scores for them. They've got a pretty good side. I think certainly their bowling, Maharaj, I think their bowling attack would cause England a lot of problems. I think it's the batting that might be the question mark that we have around them, and that we don't know if, when they face, they faced India, they got knocked over a couple of times cheaply in that India in the first test that they lost, second test that they lost. The first test, Dean Elgar scored 185 and they ended up winning by an innings. So, I think there are certainly questions about, are they good enough? But now we're going to see that, right? They're going to play at Lords against probably Australia, if all things kind of go to what we think might happen, or it might be Sri Lanka, who knows? But they are going to be tested. On your point about the equity stuff, I don't disagree. The perfect scenario is that everyone plays each other, right? But let's say they do that. They're going to have to do it over 4 years.
Yeah.
Is that too long?
It has to start with them playing the same number of games. Like you've got South Africa have played 11, England have played 22 games, and they all count in various different scenarios. It's just madness to me. I don't know how you can select 2 of the best teams when one team's played twice as many games as the other. But we're not going to solve that tonight.
We're not.
The only way that this gets decided is that South Africa goes to Lords and win.
Yeah,
everyone will shut up, me included. If South Africa go to Lords and win,
because they didn't win, New Zealand won. The same argument was had then, and it's about. I think the thing is that you're trying to have this debate about who's the best been the best test team over the past 3 years.
It's India.
I think it's really hard to tell, to be quite honest, right now with the way that the results are going. Because yes, it was India for the first 2 years. It hasn't been for the last 6 months. They haven't been very good. They got beaten by New Zealand quite convincingly, and we've just seen that New Zealand are not where we want that New Zealand side to be. And they like we've just talked about for 45 minutes or an hour or whatever we've been going. They could easily be 3-1 down in this series against Australia. They could, on the flip side, they could easily be 2-1 up. Had a few things gone their way, but Test cricket is wide open at the moment. We're seeing Sri Lanka perform well. We've seen a lot of results go different ways. And I don't know. I think it's really hard to tell, actually, these guys are the best. This is the best team over the past, 3 years.
Well, only Lords will tell us the answer, I guess. And people who listen to the podcast, hopefully will give us their view. I've certainly not been shy of giving my view around the inequity of the system being the problem, not necessarily it's South Africa's fault. They can only play who's in front of them and whose games they've been scheduled against. But it does cause us to talk about how would we change the system for the better. And I think that's a great thing for Test cricket, is that people care enough to want to change the system to make it better, because it's certainly not perfect at the moment. And whether or not it needs fixing or can be improved, remains to be seen. But yeah, we now know one of the teams that's going to be at Lords, and it will be down to Australia, India, and Sri Lanka. Now I think are the only three that can potentially qualify.
In
right?
Australia, yeah.
Australia's a long way.
Yeah, I think Australia's in the box seat for that. I'm gonna call an audible, and we're having no idea of what time, how long we've been going for.
It feels like
I think
hours.
we've been going a while, and that we can leave the New Zealand chat to Baldy's going to be away. I know Binksy's been trying to reveal your address. I won't reveal where you are going for a couple of weeks, but you're going to be away for a little while. So Raj and I can kind of reconvene in the new year and have we wanted to have a bit of a chat about sort of where New Zealand's at, what the 2024 has been like for them, and kind of what we might expect in 2025. But I reckon we can have that chat in another pod, yeah?
Yeah, sounds good.
You want to take us away, Baldy?
Well, that wraps up this year in cricket on the Top Order podcast. In fact, what we might do, by the sound of it, is have a full year in review while I'm away gallivanting across different countries and doing different things. But on my behalf and on behalf of everyone here on the Top Order podcast, thank you for tuning into us this year in 2024, as we've talked absolute bollocks about the world of cricket across this year. And we look forward to doing so again next year. So look, take care of yourselves over the New Year break. Have a tremendous time. Take care of yourselves. Be safe. And we will see you in 2025 on the Top Order podcast. See you then.